Look, I see a lot of people in the industry having a life. People in the industry, they've decided, look, whether they run on set menus, whether they run on less days a week. I think people have said, let's run our business. We can make it profitable in less shifts, less services a week, and we can have days off and we can have a life.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Over the last year, we've documented the impact that the pandemic has had on those plying their trade in the food industry. We've heard heartache, success stories, closures, new openings, and legends that have left an indelible mark on our culinary landscape, but even with years of experience, found themselves trying to find their feet after the rug was pulled out from under them. How does one reflect on the way things were and the new world of hospitality emerging? Russell Blaikie is the former owner of Must Wine Bar in Western Australia. Russell, how are you?
Great, Anthony. How are you?
Good. You're the heartbeat of the industry over there. You've been around for a couple of decades and had an amazing influence. But you let go of Must fairly recently. What was it like, that period of time, letting go of something that had been part of you for so long?
So I was doing a radio gig yesterday with a mate of mine, Russell Wolf, and he said, it's 102 days. And I kind of said, 102 days what? He said, since you closed. And I wasn't measuring the days, actually, because I've been having a great time. But look, we couldn't. It's really weird because COVID presented, and this is terrible to say this, but COVID presented one of the great years for us in Perth, because we were able to, even though we went into that terrible shutdown and the stress around it, once we came out of it, it was incredibly busy. And then on top of that, when we announced at the end of our lease we were closing and I wasn't going to renew into another 10-year lease, we took 3,000 bookings in a week. And it was just a melee. And the business was like we've never seen it in the 19 years of operation before that. And that was lovely because it was a response, I think, to how people felt about Must and what it meant to them. There were so many stories from people who had weddings with us, who'd had their first date, who'd occasionally, I don't know what they were doing in the toilets, but occasionally there was something happening in the toilets that was a bit of fun. But seriously, Must was this. You kind of you reflect on it when people come up to you and just grab you and say, "Look, this is I'm having a last dinner here because this is what we did. This is where we met. This is where we consummated a business relationship. This is where we did all these sorts of things." And it meant so many different things to so many different people. It was really good. However, the difficulty when you wind back to the shutdown in March. I don't think in 19 years I've ever been as stressed. We were doing lots of things, so I think we probably had a bit of a leg up in the sense that I was running a catering business out of Must as well. I had packaging. I knew where to get it from. I knew all of those things. So, in fact, 2 days before the shutdown, we were running our takeout operation.
Wow! And
that was just. I've always been a bit of a front foot person, and I thought this is all going to shit. We've got to. I hate the word pivot because pivot thinks you did it quickly and easily. It was dragging a 10-story building crane. It wasn't a pivot, but changing so quickly and getting everyone on board, the whole crew on board to say, look, we're doing this. And 2 days later, the place was shut. And we immediately jumped into a takeout business. And most importantly to me, I kept 10 staff employed during that. I had kitchen hands driving stuff. I had my manager running the order process. We set up an online ordering system pretty quickly. We had some of the wait the girls who were waiting on the floor, a couple of them couldn't get JobKeeper. So we said, okay, you've got a job, and we'll find a way to make it work for you. So we kept 10 people employed in all sorts of ways. And our food sales went up. Our food sales went up. It's like, what? And it's like the people are coming in, they're taking the picking up the takeout order. So, they're saying to the team or me, if I'm out the front, we got this. You got this. We're going to support you. And I think so many people in hospo just felt that overwhelming support of their customers, as we did during that period. And it was just, you just felt it. It was tangible. You could feel people walking up, and we had our pickup. We opened our front windows and we had a bench in the front window so nobody came inside the business. And you're looking out to Beaufort Street, which is one of the busiest streets in Perth, 50,000, 60,000 cars a day. It's empty, no cars. And these people are coming up, they're grabbing their takeout, and they're just so happy about it. And it was so surreal. It was so surreal. And I think the way I explain it is I'm a chef and I'm a business person. And for 18 years, I felt I had total control of my business. I knew what I was doing. When times were tough, I could implement something within the business to make it happen or change it. But when COVID hit, I felt I had no control whatsoever of what was going to happen in the world around us. And that caused that level of stress, anxiety and stress. And it was tough. But then, look, once we settled into the takeout and it just went off like a frog in a sock, everyone's just so happy in the team, and we were able to keep most of the team on. Or not most of the team, but a lot of the team stayed on. And so when we came out of it, we had our core team ready to roll, which is great.
WA shut itself off from the rest of Australia and put in some pretty heavy restrictions on anyone coming in, and they still continue. But you mentioned the boom that's happened. What has the trade period been like without an influx of tourists, but a real boom from locals? As an operator that's been around for a while, paint a picture of the last.
Look, I'd put the current boom in hospitality around, the 2008, 2009 kind of economic boom, because of the everyone's captured in Western Australia. Everyone is there is a lot of money rumbling around in the economy, and it's not just in hospitality. So, fancy houses on the beach in Dunsborough, they're going for $500,000 over their asking price. People are saying, well, look, I'm not going to go to Italy, or I'm not going to go here and for this holiday. I'm staying here, so I've got this cash. What am I going to do with it? And that money's rumbling around in the economy. Mm-hmm. And likewise, in hospitality, people want a really good experience. But we took that opportunity to review the business, and we didn't want to open the same business that we closed. So we put in banquette seating, make it more comfortable to spread people out in the bistro, took a big wine rack out, made the place fresher and more open, and repainted the front of it. It really just tidied it up. And it was really funny because, when people noticed that, they really noticed the freshness and the open air nature of the bistro and what we did. Because in the past, I've spent, like $50,000 refitting the bistro and repainting and putting sound paneling in and whatever. And I'd gone downstairs and chatted to regular customers and said, what do you think? And they go, what do you think of what? and you kind of go, oh, and you kind of point to it and you just kind of wave them off and go, no, that's great. It's okay. Sometimes you realise, anyway, it just goes back to, we went back to the point of thinking about what's important what is really important, what's important to customers and what's important to running the business and what's not. And we got the trimmers out and we cut away everything that we didn't think was important. And we just kept the things that were. We went to a set menu for a period of time, reduced food wastage, changed it a bit every week. We'd had to take the takeout component out because we couldn't cope with takeout and the a la carte, the dining. And it just was we're open 4 days a week, not 5, so that gave the kitchen team, an early night and then four solid nights. It just gave everyone a breath, and it gave us a step back and a way to revise how to run a new business in the COVID regime, and it was just really refreshing. It was like wonderful, and the best thing about it with any hospitality business is that I was able to retain really the core of my team, and on the floor, core team was there. Pablo was running the crew. They were just terrific. And on top of all this, Anthony, I chose May last year to have a shoulder reconstruction because I'm a bit of a surfer. And in 2016, I was mucking around with my mates at Scarborough, jumped off my surfboard and landed square on my shoulder on a sandbank and just ripped my shoulder apart. I'd been living with that for almost 4 years. Pain just got too much, and the surgeon just said, look, when you're ready, let me know. And I thought, look, let's give it a go. And I had Masato, my sous chef, in the kitchen, and I thought, I can't just leave him run this on his own. And the original head chef that I hired from us, Andre Ma, who we should talk about in this segment, I kind of rang him and said, look, I'm having this operation. I need a bit of help because I couldn't even lift a knife. What are you up to? And Andre said, yeah, mate, I'll come back and give you a hand. I'll do it for you. And literally he did it for me. And Andre is at a stage of his life where he doesn't want to work crazy hours. He's done his time. He's made his dues, but he is such a talented chef, and I'd still call him the best charcutier in Australia. So Andre came back basically as a casual for the whole year, right until we closed. And I had two Italians in the kitchen, a couple who Marco was out of a Michelin star restaurant. Like the core team was just guns. I just had the gun team, and we're doing takeout. We're putting food into a box. It was fantastic. We're actually doing restaurant food in a box. And I was kind of standing there doing a bit of pointing because I couldn't even slice bread with the right shoulder done. And the guys were really supportive of that, and they're going, don't lift that, don't do that, But I was in the kitchen with them every day, and that was part of the deal, was just being around because that's really important. And they got me through that, and that was incredible. And the fantastic thing about it was Andre, who I opened the business with, the wonderful bookend to the business closing was Andre was there at the end. 19 years later, and he was with me for 13 years to start with, and then Andre came back and did the job and came back and closed Must with me as well, 19 years in, which was just one of the most amazing bookends you could ever have in business.
Well, let's go back 19 years to the very beginning and why you started Must Bar and what it was like back then.
Look, Perth was a really interesting place. Let's rewinding back before Must. I could probably rewind a couple of steps, but look, I'd opened as head chef a place called 44 King Street in Perth in 1991, and I worked. Phil Sexton was one of the owners. And one of my business partners in Must, Gary Gazzatti, was one of Phil's partners in 44 King Street. So that's where the relationship goes. King Street became an iconic place in Perth. It's no longer there. I think it's a fashion shop or something. But we opened this business, Phil opened this business in the west end of Perth, in the centre of the city, in a wasteland of, there was no food businesses there. There was nothing, literally nothing. And we created this. We set up a bakery in the business. I set up a bakery in there. We had this really vibrant menu, and to this day, it's still the hardest food business I've run because David Coomer was my first sous chef. Kurt Sampson worked with us at at King Street. We've become lifelong friends. Steve Scafidi was one of the managers, and Steve is now at State Buildings. It was like a who's who of like hospo crew coming through that business. It was 110-seater. It was incredibly busy, and the menu was like a stopover of you could put any dish on the menu as long as it was consistent to that city in the world. So there'll be there could be a char siu duck rice paper rolls, or there could be rice paper rolls. There could be red braised pork ribs next to line caught snapper with a fennel biscuit, panzanella, and aioli. So we try and keep the dish consistent with the country or the city that it's from, and that was 6 dishes a week, changing, incredibly hard, but 10 years of an incredible business. I eventually bought Phil Sexton out and became a partner in that business. And then I sold out, I think, in 1999. Then skip forward a couple of years, Gary Gazzatti rings me and says, look, we've got a site in Highgate, and do you want to come and meet with me and Anne-Marie Banting? Anne-Marie's got a really good idea for it. Sat down, and Anne-Marie said, look, I want to create Willie's Wine Bar in Paris, in Perth. And look, all of my training back going in my past, all my traditional training as a chef was in French food. I mean, I worked at the Dorchester for a couple of years with Anton Mosiman, worked up in the Terrace restaurant, 1 Michelin star. All we did was classic and modern French food, all that technique. And if somebody asked me what was centre target for me then, it would be French. And when somebody comes and says, we want to open a French bistro, it was like, let me at it. I'm in. I'm in. Gary was an original partner in the Matilda Bay Brewing Company, and he set up the Queen's Hotel on Beaufort Street. And across the road, he'd seen this site many years before called Shambles, which was an old furniture store. And he thought, gee, that would be a good site for a pizzeria at the time. And then along comes the site up for sale, up for lease. And Gary, I think, spotted it, and Anne-Marie had the idea, and they co-opted me to come in and become a business partner and run the kitchen operation. And, we had the name. The name of the current building was Shambles. We thought we wouldn't call it that. And so we thought, must has that double meaning of, unfermented, the juice and skins and stalks of grapes that's just been crushed. So we did that, and we launched Must with the concept of Must being this little bit of Paris on Beaufort Street. But being the place that you could drop into the bar, have a drink, amazing wine list, have something that you just gawk over, just an incredible wine list that Anne-Marie started writing, and then others followed. And I got to cook food that was, like French bistro food that was really soul food for me, stuff like, raw salmon with a shaved fennel salad and Dillon seed mustard dressing. This is probably menus from early 2000s, let's be honest. I do, steak frites with a beautiful béarnaise. We do a duck leg confit with I think in those days, a Pedro Jimenez lacquered pork belly and autumn vegetable and lentil braise. Meredith goat cheese and vegetable terrine with walnuts and currant vino cotto. So a little bit of a modern take on traditional French bistro. And the core of that, the first part of that had to be charcuterie. And I advertised for a head chef. And this guy called Andre Marr, this chef called Andre Marr, who's born the same year as me, 1963, applied for it. And I looked at his CV and I went, what the Andre trained he worked for his dad. His dad's a charcutier. He worked in his dad's charcuterie shop, went to Paris from the top of France, went down to Paris and worked in charcuterie in Paris. And then he kind of trained as a chef as well and went into cooking. And Andre's sitting there, I think in Cottesloe, working in this place. And I think kind of his real resource wasn't being tapped as a great charcuterie. And I kind of had this menu where I went, look, I've got a chicken liver parfait recipe from the Dorchester Hotel. Look, I'd love to do ham on Percy. I'd love to do, a pate en croûte. I love to, yeah. And he goes, yeah, of course. What do you want? Yeah, easy, mate. I can do it. So we put together this charcuterie plate. Andre executed it perfectly, and that was the first item on the menu, charcuterie. And we, I reckon it was 2 years that we didn't sell it. Didn't sell. Nobody could pronounce it. Charcuterie. But when you know something's good, you stick to your guns, because it was sensational charcuterie. It was stuff I'd only tasted in France. And Andre was making it, and I just said to the guys, stick with it. And the reason I could stick with it is because I had brilliant people on the floor, because they would sell charcuterie, they would talk it up, they would go, if you have a glass of wine at the bar, just get a charcuterie plate because it'll work. You can order pretty well any glass of wine and have a charcuterie, and they're always going to sing together. They'll work. They're married. And then they started to pick wines that would go really well with charcuterie. So it might be not high acid Rieslings or Pinot Blancs from Alsace, or cooler regions of France, or even a Pinot Noir or a Vouvray. You name it. It's just built for wine. And the guys on the floor, Emma, all the guys, Lachlan, Aaron, James, Steph, Zach, they just go out and go, give it a go, you'll love it. And within 2 years, we had created a following for the charcuterie plate amongst a bistro that was just booming. Like, the place was just rocking, absolutely rocking. We were licensed for 174 people.
Wow.
And it kind of became party central. Anytime after 10 o'clock on, Friday and Saturday nights, it morphed into this beast that just became, the bar was deep with people, and it was just a party for years and years and years. And it was such a fun place to work.
19 years is extraordinary for any restaurant or bar in the industry. What's been some of the highlights over the years, and how much did the establishment change in that period of time?
Look, one of the early highlights was we were the first non-smoking bar in WA. We set the business up as that right at day one. And, I'd experimented with it back in the King Street days and saw there wasn't back in the King Street days, I'll never forget it. We had a guy or a woman who stubbed a cigarette out on a guy's arm because he complained about his smoking. And I'm lightly asthmatic, and I hate going to a bar and you're trying to have a really good glass of wine and you've got someone's cigarette smoking wafting across you. So, easy decision. We as a partnership group, we said, look, we're going to open as non-smoking. That's it. Boom, go outside. And we did that, and that was a big highlight because that changed the venue for anyone who walked in. It was always that clean air, which was really fresh. The highlights, look, we won all these awards. Like, all of that stuff was really good, and I value the awards really highly, but also I value more for the fact that those people that worked there at those times could take them away. And, for example, Emma Farrelly was an amazing person. I worked with a lot of amazing people, but Emma, she worked with me for, would have been 6 years, I think. And Paul McCardle worked with Emma very closely on the wine list. Paul kind of flew over the top of it. And was my wine consultant, and Emma worked as restaurant manager and som in the business. And we were picking up these wine awards year on year out for the wine lists. And then I think in 2009 we got, I think we might have got some early, but in 2009 we got the 3 Goblet Award Wine List of the Year in Western Australia. And I had this, I never, ever put awards up on the wall of the business. There was not one award up on the wall of the business. They're all in a store cupboard at the back. And literally, I'm sorry, but there was just piles of these things out the back. And when we closed, and Emma was coming in for dinner in December last year, I kind of went through and I looked, when was Emma? Oh, actually, Emma was here in 2009, and we got 3 goblets then. So I gave Emma that award, and she cried, and it was like, wow, that value of that award to Emma is just unspeakable. It's so good that she could take that away, and that's hers for life. They're the things that mean so much to me, and so many other somms like Stefano. I did the same thing with Aaron Commons. I did the same thing with as well, because they had patches of time who were they were integral to the business and running the business, that they basically won those awards for the business and were clearly a part of it. And my job with those people was really just getting a great crew into the business and finding out what they needed in their life, what was important to them, and then making that happen for them. It was that was my role. It was just kind of driving the train, but the train, one man can't really start or stop a train. It's a bunch of people, shoving the coal and watching the points and all that kind of stuff that make that happen. That was so big. Those awards were great, and being able to give them to people who they meant so much to was, I think, a really, really good experience for me. So if I rewind back a bit, because I mentioned to you how Anne-Marie and Gary approached me and said, look, we're going to open this French wine bar. There was a defining moment a lot earlier in my life that kind of defined the yes that I said when they offered me that, and that was in 1984. I went to France. I was part of the Australian team, a culinary team that went to the Culinary Olympics in Frankfurt, and fantastic experience. And I thought, look, I'll use that opportunity to have a bit of a travel through France. Bill Pannell, who owns Mosswood, who was a family friend, said, look, I've got these friends I know in Burgundy, and you can go and stay with them for a couple of nights or whatever. So he organised that. We went down to Burgundy and stayed with Becky Wasserman. And I didn't know it then, but Becky Wasserman is one of the greatest living importers of Burgundy into America. But to me, she was this American lady who's very kind and lovely, and who I cooked a dinner for over this wood fire in a 300-year-old barn that we stayed in for that night. The next morning, Becky and her son said, come upstairs, we're having a bit of a tasting. And they had these bottles laid out on a map of the Côte de Beaune. And we tasted some of these wines that were up and down the map of the Côte de Beaune, which is a pretty small area. It's not that huge. And these wines were just so incredibly different, elegant, truly amazing, finessed, the higher up the Côte you went. And as the wines from the base of the Côte were, a little bit more robust, more, village or just Vin Ordinaire wines, but all made from a Pinot Noir. And there was incredible variation in the flavours of these wines, the weight, the texture, the tannins, you name it. They were just incredibly, so much different. Becky's son got us in the 2CV. My sister was with us. We drove to every vineyard. And what I couldn't believe was that these vineyards were within a couple of 100 metres of each other. And we're tasting wines that were so different, that were so varied, from elegant, feminine and beautiful down to robust and full-bodied. And they were literally, some of them were within a stone's throw of each other. And that was my first lesson in terroir when it came to wine. And that led to a long-standing passion for wine for me. But then back in the TCV, up to Dijon, sat us down in a brasserie on a corner, drinking the same wines and eating charcuterie. And that was the defining moment. I was going to open one of these places sometime in my life. whenever the opportunity came up, and the opportunity did, and that was it for me.
Well, 19 years is extraordinary, and there aren't many people that have visited WA and not gone to your establishment, and same with residents of WA that love good food and wine. Tell us about the decision to close the restaurant and what sort of impact it had on you.
Well, look, the decision was pretty easy because it's a choice, and the choice was sign up for another 10 years of lease with the incredible uncertainty of the COVID year, or go and do something else. And that I think COVID made the decision really easy, because when you commit to a 10-year lease, you're paying that lease. You don't get out of it. It's there. It's there for the 10 years, and you're committed to 10 years of those costs. And we're in a COVID year. Incredibly uncertain. How long is this going to go for? Is it going to go for 12 months? Is it going to go for 2 years? Is it going to be what's going to happen? The decision's easy. Let's get to the end of the lease. Let's shut up shop and then move on and do something else. And so that wasn't a difficult decision. And I think after 19 years of being in business in one place, that made it easier to say, yeah, look, it's time. It's time. Because you go through so many ups and downs in business that you kind of think, really, if we wanted to do something with Must for the next 10 years, you'd probably have to. I think you'd probably have to really reinvent the place again, because from 2001 to 2019, we really never deviated off the core kind of idea of Must, which was a Parisian bistro, a great place that you could drop in or have a big event in the heart of Beaufort Street. And I think other people say it became an icon, and it became iconic in terms of when people were reflecting to me what it meant to them. And but in business, you can't really get sentimental, because if you've had a good innings, it comes down to the indecision, that uncertainty around the year we were in, and just really not wanting to commit to another 10. And that's given me the opportunity to review my entire life over the last 103 days to get out and consult and refresh and work out what I want to do next. And I'm not there yet, but the consulting's been really rewarding, and the opportunities are pretty great and big, and they look like fun and probably a huge challenge, because Western Australia is in this incredible, and I think the whole of Australia is, but Western Australia is in this incredibly difficult position of hospitality businesses are so busy, and we can't staff them. There are just not the staff to man them, and that just creates so many difficulties. So I think the next 10 years for me will be working out how we make a hospitality model that is innovative and attractive to people who work in the game. And that's probably what I'm going to be doing for quite a long time. I think we have to innovate. We have to come up with new ideas. We have to attract staff in a different way. We have to make hospitality a better place to work. That's really important. It's got to be people first. And that will drive the successful businesses of the future in WA.
You mentioned that the last 19 years that there was a lot of problem solving, and you're always able to be in control of any sort of issues that you were confronted with, but the pandemic was different. Has there been lessons learnt in the last year as an operator that you'll transfer to something you may do in the future?
Yeah, don't make things too complicated. Don't over design businesses. Don't decomplex them. Make them simpler. You don't run with anything extra that you don't need. I mean, I had in 2012, I had 500 wines on the list. In 2020, I wrote the list myself, and it was back in front of an A4 sheet. And I thought it was still just as exciting. Probably not as exciting as a 500 wine list, especially when guys like Paul and Emma and Steph and Aaron wrote them. But decomplex it. Like, you've got to make business less complex. I think you have to make food less complex, because if you've got limited manpower, you've got to have the 1, 2, 3 principle. Core, another component, and then a finish. I think times are changing where you've got to use great produce, and I think produce will probably be the thing that will even. I've always been a champion, of West Australian produce. It's the DNA. I'm a farm boy. We had the whole farming background means that if you drink milk from a cow when it's fresh out of a cow, it tastes better than stuff in a bottle. So putting produce first, and when you highlight produce, really good produce, simply, the work is mainly done. That sort of stuff is just critically important to treat food simply, but respect produce. And I think the innovation that we're going to be seeing in the next few years in hospitality in WA is going to be pretty different. I went down last week to the Great Southern. I've done a lot of festivals in the past, and it was a great opportunity to catch up with one of the core crew of Must, which is Amy Hamilton, who's got Liberté down in Albany, and just a total legend. Amy is a savant when it comes to putting ingredients together. I can't believe what Amy does. Seriously. She gets local produce down in the Great Southern and will combine local crab and then some local mushrooms and some noodles and wrap them in a rice paper wrapper and crumb and deep fry it, and it tastes like heaven. And she's constantly come up with these incredible dishes out of local produce. She's truly amazing. But so down in the Great Southern, when I do those events, I ask people for, give me an ingredient list. What can you get? And I was doing an event at Orange Tractor, and it's an organic vineyard. He's got lots of mates doing organic stuff, and he said, "Look, I've got a mate who's picking prickly pears, and can you do something with that?" I said, "Bring them on. I've never used prickly pears before. Give it a go." And these things, you can't touch them. I found out that you've got to use a fork to poke your fork in, and then flick the peel off with your knife, and it just reveals this most amazing, incredibly coloured fruit that tastes a little bit like rock melon. That's just amazing. I thought this would make a great granita. So made that into a granita. And then I've fermented some local cream with kefir, so a kefir cream that fermented, and I made a panna cotta from that and just put a spoonful of this prickly pear granita on top. And I think it's the best dish I've done in years, because it's just the simplest thing ever, using stuff that you've just found or just been brought to you that has integrity and it's local. And it's like, wow, gee, should do more of that. Because it's just great food, and it was a bit of a highlight for me to be able to serve something like that, with the privilege of knowing that Murray's mates had gone and picked these prickly pears, because I think you need welding gloves to get the things off. But I think look, it's when you think about kitchens. I guess I've always run the business from the kitchen, and Amy and Andre and guys like Chris Trong, who worked with me in the early days and went down to run the Margaret River business when we ran that. There's a couple of other guys, Diego and George Cossio, two brothers who are incredible chefs who are in Melbourne now. Lisa Shrewstone, who's now got her own pastry business, and the sous chef that stayed with me through that last tough year, and 5 years before that was Masato Hirai. And, when you work together in the environment that we work in, the team becomes this indelible band of brothers that you never lose, that incredible respect for. And I've seen that right through my business, on both in the floor teams and in kitchen teams, how they become, it's more than an employee, it's more than a workmate. When I look at the floor teams, there's lifelong friendships, there's partnerships and children out of floor teams from Must. And the meaning of that, to me, is more than any plate of food or any glass of wine that you can ever serve, because those friendships and those relationships are lifelong, and they will forever kind of outlive the memory of Must Wine Bar. And to me, they're probably more important than anything we ever put in a plate or in a glass. And you do all these things, but it's just so nice to have those relationships. Look, there's other stuff that I've done, and this is the other thing about Must being such a busy place. It gave me opportunities to do so many other things, and it was funny because I had a business in Margaret River. We had Must in Margaret River, and I had a staff member there, Joe Linus, who she had a chat to me one day, and she said, "Look, I do a bit of work for this charity called Surf Aid, blah, blah, blah. And there's this guy coming to West Australia. His name's Dr. Dave Jenkins, and I reckon you should have a chat to him." I went, "Yeah, okay." And because Joe knew I was a surfer. And I had a chat with Dave, and that changed my life, because he started this charity called Surf Aid, where he would go surfing on one of these remote islands in Indonesia. They'd go onto the beach and they'd see all these graves. And he'd kind of say, "What's all this?" And they said, "Well, they're kids, they're children." And he couldn't believe it. And he's just going, "Why?" And it's funny that a lot of these kids would die directly after childbirth or through malnutrition and all of these different reasons. And as a doctor, he kind of goes, "These are simple things these kids are dying of. I'm going to do something about it." So he started Surf Aid, and he just started this organisation that just supported people, empowered them to when if they're feeding, they're having a little rice porridge. If they stirred these little green wild spinach into the rice porridge, it would give the child vitamin C and help them avoid malnutrition. If they supplied mosquito nets, it would cover them from getting mosquito bites, and dying from either dengue or other fevers they get. Teaching a woman, teaching someone who's helping a mother birth a child, if you teach the midwife and say, "Look, if you wash your hands before you deliver this child, you will drop that mortality rate of those children by double-digit figures." So he's put these programs throughout Indonesia, and they're just spreading throughout Indonesia so incredibly well. And I just went, this is so simple. It's not top-heavy. All the money was going to the programs. And so I started this group of chefs. I said to my mates down in Margaret, "Let's start this thing. We'll call it Surfing Chefs for Surf Aid." A bunch of surfing mates of mine down there. We started a charity event in Margaret River business and raised a bit of money. It was great. So we thought, we've got something here, and Surf Aid thought the same. So we've done about 8 of them so far, 8 or 9. We've raised so far $500,000 for Surf Aid. And the last couple were over with Darren at Three Blue Ducks in Byron. So we took it around Australia. And Darren just jumped on it like crazy, and his staff were just so on board with it. And we raised so much money in Byron, and Darren's now an ambassador. And it's, that's because I had some time and ability to step out of the business occasionally and do other work, and it's incredibly rewarding. I've met so many fantastic chefs around Australia who I never realised served, who just really want to give back. It's probably pretty tough during these times to spend any time outside doing that work, but the generosity of our crew, the generosity of everyone is just amazing. We've got ability, and it's great to see so many people, so many cooks around Oz using that ability for good.
It's been a crazy year, and you've let go of something that's been a big part of your life. But what sort of positives do you see for the industry moving forward coming out of this?
Look, I see a lot of people in the industry having a life. So first of all, internally, people in the industry, they've decided, look, whether they run on set menus, whether they run on less days a week, I think people have said, let's run our business. We can make it profitable in less shifts, less services a week, and we can have days off, and we can have a life. Because hospitality, I think, pre-COVID was a lot about running your business, keeping it together, keeping it all afloat, and just keeping it together by threads. Now I think you can solidly stitch it together, and by having that life, by having those days off, by being able to reflect, you actually go into your business much fresher and more creative and more vibrant and more energetic, and the customers see it. And the other thing is the customers. I honestly see our customers, and I can speak for myself, are so much more appreciative of what we do in our game. And like I'm assuming it's when they got it taken away from them, they realised that, actually, I really do appreciate this. I think I will be more patient. I think I'll be more appreciative, and I don't see so much online kind of derision. I think the world's changed in customer perception of the value of hospitality to the world, and I think that's such a good thing.
Well, Russell, it's amazing to hear your story, and I feel like we could probably record a couple of episodes. I feel like you've got a lot more to say. It's what you've done with Must Wine Bar, absolutely extraordinary, and look forward to seeing what's to come as well. We've loved having you on Deep in the Weeds today, and no doubt we're going to catch up again soon and have another chat. Thanks,
Anthony. It's been a real pleasure, and thanks for asking me.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we share the stories of Australia's hospo community, suppliers and producers in search of hope during this pandemic. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.